All right, so we're here today, Supreme Court Judge candidate Jim Vazana, and I can tell you I've known Judge Vazana many years, even before he was elected a judge, and my brief introduction will be obviously an experienced lawyer prior to becoming a judge, which all the lawyers can tell who the experienced lawyers are when they become a judge, the way they treat people, the way they control the courtroom, those kind of things, but just has earned a really good reputation as a family court judge in Monroe County and now running for Supreme Court. And I would say the reason we're really interested in having him here today, he's over at the Monroe County Hall of Justice, been there for years, and probably the judge who smiles the most in the whole building, just gets along with people, whether they're court staff or lawyers or litigants or whatever it is, has a fabulous reputation as being a good person, and that's something that we're always interested in.
Well, I'm humbled by your comments, Mr. King. Thank you.
So tell us a little about yourself, Judge.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on today. I appreciate it. Appreciate talking to your audience as well, a little bit about myself, my campaign, and talk a little bit about the court system itself. It's something I'm very passionate about. But a little bit, the real 5-minute or less bullet point of me is I grew up just a few miles down the road from here. We're in Rochester, New York, in the city of Rochester. I grew up in the 10th Ward, it's called. It's Augustine, and I grew up on Augustine off of Dewey Avenue and Lake Avenue. My mother and father were both laborers. We had very modest means. And very young in my life, I learned the pride of earning a paycheck. I've done many different things before I even started practicing law. I've mopped apartment floors, emptied garbage. I worked in construction. I worked as a meat cutter for a local meat market. Favorite job was a bartender. That's how I got through law school, actually. I went to Aquinas, and then I went to the University of Rochester. From there, I went to the University of Dayton Law School, and started my career practicing law here in Rochester for Pauley and Barney. It was my first firm I worked with. That's where I learned and found the love for practicing family and matrimonial law, which also expanded to representing all aspects of family business, estates and trusts, things of that nature.
And then, so who were the partners at Pauley and Barney?
Ray Pauley and Brian Barney.
And well-known attorneys here in town for the folks who don't know. And then you transitioned to another firm after that? Yes,
after that I was at Woods Oviatt for a little bit. And then from there, I ended up at Chamberlain, DeMonda, Oppenheimer, and Greenfield, a firm that had only been around since 1897, right down in the Four Corners in Rochester, which is State Street and Main Street, known as the Four Corners. And then I ended up there as the managing partner of the firm, and I was the managing partner for several years. So one fateful night, we were getting ready for a partnership meeting, and one of my partners said, "What's wrong?" And I was just very irritated a little bit that I had been on trial for several days with a judge that hadn't had any private practice experience. I didn't understand and appreciate the trials and tribulations of being a lawyer, but more importantly, the trials and tribulations of actually being a client, an individual, a person that appeared before them and was relying upon them, because we can't forget as a judge, and I know you don't forget when you practice law, these are the most important issues people are coming to see us for and entrusting us to deal with. So because I started a little bit of complaining about that, my partner said, "Well, why don't you do something about it?" And that sort of resonated with me because that's what my mother used to say, plain and simple. Don't complain, do something about it. So I started my trek and I ran for family court judge. I was successful being elected to the family court bench. Shortly after that election, I was appointed to the Supreme Court, and I'm an acting Supreme Court justice. For the last 3 years, I've been the presiding justice of the integrated domestic violence part. Now, that's an interesting part. That's a part that deals with both criminal and civil matters. I call it an umbrella court. As an example for our listeners, if you have a criminal charge and then someone in that same family unit files, a custody proceeding or files a divorce action, or for that matter, even a business dissolution, you could be in 3, 4, 5 different courts over the course of 5 different days over several months. It's not very efficient for them or for the court system. So we try to bring them under one umbrella for a judge that has jurisdiction to hear all those matters, and that would be in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, so you probably don't know this, but about 10 years ago, I was, or I guess more than that now, we get older.
Yes, we do.
I was the DA.
But you age very well, so
Oh, thanks.
I'm not worried about
Yeah,
that.
thanks. I was the DA in the IDV court for a couple of years with Justice Renzi and Justice
Okay.
Doyle.
Oh, absolutely.
Spent a lot of time in that court, and it's serious work for a judge. There's a lot going on of very passionate litigants. I mean, even everyone is, but especially in that courtroom, there's a lot going on.
You know, you've got to, it's, excuse me, I like to say it's a balancing act sometimes. I mean, you certainly have to protect the family unit. You certainly have to protect the individuals that have been subjected to domestic violence. In the same respects, you have to balance, you know, the children's rights to see possibly the other parent or spouse. And then, of course, you know, the other spouse or individual's rights as well. So it's a balancing act. And you balance it by, you know, living up to just some basic mottos. That is, treat people with respect, dignity, allow them to talk. I think I give several lawyers heart attacks every time someone says, Judge, I want to say something. I say, okay, but check with your lawyer first. I want to hear it, but check with your lawyer first, because we have to protect their rights.
So it's a real privilege to have you here for us. I know Bree and I are both excited. We get the judge on the hot seat. We all want to ask judges all these questions, and so we got 10 or 15 questions we'd like to ask you. I think probably some of our listeners would like to know, like
Sure.
ask the judge. So why don't you run through a few, Bree?
So,
Can I just preface that real
Yes.
quick? I'm just going to preface by saying, and I know you all know that, but for our listeners, you know, the judicial ethics prohibit me from answering questions that would relate to specific issues of the law, because they and I don't disagree with that. One, we don't want to promote forum shopping. So if you know how a judge is going to rule on a particular issue, you're going to wait for that judge and try to get that judge. That's called forum shopping. The second thing is it's a violation of the ethics. So, but you ask the question and I'll
you can just tell me if you can answer it. All right.
I hope I sorted through. I think they're general, just kind of like what you're
Do
thinking
you have
about.
like a
as
big gong I can hit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I was just going to ask, prior to becoming a judge, were there any judges that you looked up to or enjoyed appearing in front of?
Yeah, there are several judges that I consider to be mentors of mine. Certainly Judge Owens, John Owens, Judge Calvaruso, Judge Saragusa. I don't want to exclude others.
No, anyone, but yes,
you know,
any that, you know, you've
Judge
enjoyed.
Winslow.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I learned a lot from them. And that's something you have to go in every day, even as a judge. Make it an opportunity to learn something new about the person or the law. And those were judges that were always open to that.
I got to jump in on that. And so you just listed off some of the great jurists and people in our legal community. And I'm pretty sure 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats.
Is that how it broke down? I didn't even.
I'm not exactly sure. So judges get on the bench and they become a judge and they ran as a political party. But I think that's one of the questions, but it was kind of a segue there. You work with Republican and Democrat judges every day. How does that interplay behind the scenes at the Hall of Justice?
The system in the state of New York is designed that for a judge, a lot of states, let me back up a second. A lot of states appoint judges. New York State does not. New York State requires the judges to, in certain areas. I know in New York City they appoint family court judges and city court judges, but upstate anyways, judges have to run for their office. And so that's why it becomes political to that extent, because as we know our procedure, you have to be in a political party to run. But once you're elected, you quickly defrock that, to be honest with you. I mean, you certainly have your principles and your ideologies, but you defrock the political party affiliation that's only to run. So the courthouse would never talk about politics, quite honestly. I mean,
You're all working together.
Yeah, we're all working together. It really is just about how to best service our constituents, which would be, the citizens that we're representing.
I know that. I've seen that, but it's for people who don't.
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
I agree. Well, you know what? Excuse me, but when they come in, no one asks them what political party they are.
Right.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares what party you are. No one cares about those issues. It's just,
can you do the job?
can you do well? Or the litigants themselves. What is the issue? This is what the law is.
And I guess I think of it like nobody wants the murderer to go free. And
If they're
whether-
guilty, absolutely.
Right,
Right.
correct. The true murder, when I say murder, somebody
Right.
who's guilty, who is proven by a jury, doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't think we all have certain beliefs that the criminal justice system or the civil justice system or the family court system should be fair. And you run as a Republican or a Democrat, and I know you're endorsed by the Republican conservative parties.
Correct.
But
Well, it just kind of goes off what makes a good judge. Like what, in your opinion, makes a good judge.
Well, I got a lot of opinion on that. How much time do we have? This is like a 5-hour episode?
It can be as long as you want.
You know what makes a good judge is someone that can effectively communicate. Doesn't have to be, in prose. It just has to be able to communicate with the people that are sitting before them. Someone that cares. Someone that wants to make a difference in those people's lives. Someone that actually recognizes that this is the most important reason these people are going to be in front of you that day, to them. And so you make that your same mission, that this is the most important thing I'm going to do, and that could have impact on this family, this business, this personal injury case, this medical malpractice case, whatever the case may be. And you got to be open to let people talk to you, as I alluded to earlier. You've got to let them talk, because they need to feel part of the process, part of the system. I'll throw this out there. I'm sure it's on your list, but we talk a lot about sidebars or bench conferences or clearing the courtroom. That happens quite a bit, and it has to happen. And 9 times out of 10, we're talking more about either procedural issues, or we're talking about how best to efficiently carry this case through the process. Okay, and it's a little more open communication. But in my court, we always go back on the record with the parties there, and,
Right.
and it's kind of ironic because I tell everybody what we talked about. So it's not, we didn't really have to do it, but and that's a recognition too that some lawyers feel more at ease and more open to talk when it's just counsel or the court.
my experience is I like to speak plain English. I grew up in the country, so I can speak very bluntly. And when you're on the record, there's a way that lawyers talk to communicate so the record's clear. But sometimes at sidebar, you can say, "Judge, this is bull," and from
absolutely.
experience, we can just cut to the chase, so we don't have to make this. And then because Mr. King does not agree with the appropriate position taken by counsel, I'm going to rule this, and we lawyer it up a little bit. But sometimes you can really
cut to the chase.
Yeah, you can be blunt and say, "This is what I'm really after," and you can say, "This is how I'm going to rule," and we move real quick that way.
So I guess to finish up on your question of what makes a good judge, someone that actually cares and is respectful.
Well, I also think, in my opinion, because I'm not an attorney, is that if
Thank God, good for you.
if I ever had to appear in front of a judge, I know that I would be intimidated. So someone who comes off personable, I feel like, okay, I could connect with this person, or this person would understand what I'm going through or what's happening, depending on the situation. So I think, that's also, which you seem very personable, is important.
Well, and just to add on something we talked about earlier, the other thing is, as a judge, you've got to recognize that, as we said, I'm not going to keep repeating myself, but it's the most important issue they're there. And that, we may schedule a court date today. We may schedule a date today, and we scheduled that 2 months ago. Well, 2 months ago, that was a great day, but we don't live in a vacuum. So you got to be understanding of that. And I think that comes with practicing law, not only as a lawyer, but also, when it comes to issues of the parties.
So when coming into a courtroom, because if you Google, what are you supposed to wear when you go into a courtroom? Is there a thing that judges look for when someone is walking into a courtroom when it comes to their clothing? Is there too sloppy? Is there too flashy? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter, to be honest with you. I mean, you have to dress respectfully.
Right.
And not, it's respectful for the state of New York, for the office.
Okay.
Okay? I hope to earn your respect as your judge. I mean, you don't get to pick that. It just gets assigned. So I hope to earn your respect as a judge. But you got to be respectful to the office. As a lawyer, I made a mistake years ago. It was a big case for this family, and they're all big cases for the family. But I represented a farmer out in Wayne County. owned lots of apple farms or lots of apple land. And we had to go to trial on different valuation issues. And I asked him, I said, look, when you got to put a suit and tie on, you've got, this is what you got to dress. I was very in tune to that because we happened to be in front of a judge that was much more strict than other about appearances. You know, you can't wear your work boots. Don't wear your work pants. Don't wear all the things that you're always comfortable in. Put a suit on. You got Sunday best suit. Because a suit I never wear, so a suit and tie, I don't want to hear anything about it. He came in the first day and he was on the witness stand. This is all he did. If you can't see, I mean, he's grabbing his collar, taking his shirt off, fidgeting, and that's a sign to a judge that either this individual's not telling the truth, potentially. That, you know, he's not liking the questions, not telling the truth. And I saw that, and I was like, Judge, can I take a recess? Sure. I got him off the stand. We ripped off his shirt and tie. So he's got to be comfortable.
He was just uncomfortable.
He was just uncomfortable. So long-winded way to answer your question. Come in respectfully dressed.
Okay.
But something that you're comfortable in. So you can just absorb what we're trying to talk about, assist with. I mean, there's several pretrial conferences before you get to an actual trial, and I think that's a lot of times, you know, people get that summons to appear, for example, in family court on October 20th at 2 o'clock, and this is your first appearance, and you have to be there. So a lot of people that don't have lawyers or can't afford to hire a lawyer, come in with a lawyer, they think that's their trial date. Unfortunately, they learn quickly that there's going to be several appearances before that. So if you dress respectfully, comfortably.
Kind of dressing of who you are as a person. Like if you are a flashy person, flashy, maybe?
To a degree.
To a degree. Maybe, you know? Like
I think
I'm blind to that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I
just
think the
find
key
it
word-
interesting because I feel like, you know.
Respectful. And there's a point where I love Judge Elliott, and he has his own.
He's a great guy.
And you can get away with a lot in Judge Elliott's court, but what you cannot get away with is a tank top. And he says his clerk used to be Mary. Mary, put him on tomorrow, right on the docket. And he would say it so they would hear. Adjourn for a shirt.
Yeah.
Then the public defender got wise to the thing. Sylvia Lopez was the public defender.
Oh, so is a good
and
lawyer.
she would keep shirts, but in all different sizes. Hold on, Judge. And she would
pull it out.
Pull it
like
out.
you're at
Go.
school.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
They don't teach you that in law school, that you'll be shopping for your
No,
clients.
absolutely, they don't.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things they don't teach us in law school. Did
That's a fun.
I answer your question? I hope I did.
You did, yes, yes. What else do you want to ask? I have a question though.
Yeah, go
My
ahead.
other question is there? I mean, you've been doing this for a very long time. Is there any?
Yeah, I'm not
case,
that old. No, I haven't. It's been over 30 years, 30-some years.
Is there any case or story that just sticks with you that really is impactful?
On the bench, it was just a young girl. Unfortunately, her parents were non-existent. The parents' parental rights were terminated. I won't go into all that. But I had her, you know, I was the judge on her case. I had to ultimately terminate her parental rights. She got into the foster care system. The people that provide the foster care system are wonderful, loving, caring people. Isn't anything. There's good judges and not so good judges. There's good foster parents and not so good foster parents. It's any business. Good lawyers, not so good lawyers, whatever. But she just didn't take the straight and narrow path. She got in some trouble. So she came into me on the juvenile delinquency proceeding that was subsequent, came about. We talked about it. I let her talk. I've known her through the cases that she appeared before me. I've known quite a bit about this young woman. And there had to come a time that punishment was put into place. And she was a resident of a detention facility because of her actions and what happened. And she never forgot that. And she actually came back into my court one day, unannounced, nothing was docketed, and she came running in, and my court deputies right away were like, whoa, ma'am, what are you doing? Because now she was a young woman, and she held up, Judge, look, I got my GED. I got this. And then she came back again when she got her associate's degree. And then she brought her child back. And it was just to come visit, to let me know, because I stood up for her. I explained to her why she had to go into secure detention. Most of it was because of what she did, and you have to be accountable for what you do.
Right. But
also for her own safety. She was living, not a very safe life. And I got to be honest, that made me very emotional when she came in, particularly with her child.
Yeah.
And she wanted to have me hold her, and wanted to take a picture. What she did. It was just.
And that she wanted to come back to you specifically to show you, like, hey, this
made a difference.
This made a difference.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And kudos to her for coming to see you, right? And to let you know.
Absolutely.
You've done that, and a lot of judges have done that, but I know you've done that same thing for 1,000 people. Mm-hmm. And
well,
they don't
you
come
hope.
back.
You never know.
I mean, you're hearing 10, 20, 30 cases a day, every day.
Yeah, more than that in some days. Yes,
Right,
absolutely.
and you added up 150 cases a week, 300 cases a month, 4,000 cases a year, and you're doing the best you can. And you don't have to vouch for yourself. I'll vouch for you. You do a good job.
Thank you.
And you affect people's lives every day. And for everyone who comes to see you, there's 100 who didn't come see you. I think that's part of probably part of the cool part of the job, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's got to be another one from when you were in private practice. Every lawyer likes to tell war stories. There's got to be one.
Yeah, there was one. There was one. It was the unfortunate part is, if you see me smile, it's because it was good work done by the team of lawyers that were involved in the case. I mean, there's always a winner and loser, unfortunately, after a trial. But ultimately, the expense associated with the trial and things of that nature and the wear and tear on it mitigates those potential wins. But it was a member of law enforcement that unfortunately we had a big trial for custody. This was in Seneca County. It wasn't in Monroe County. And, I walked in. I was like the third lawyer, which is usually a death sentence as being the third lawyer. But just something he said. So there was some synergy between us and his story and all the parties involved. And so I agreed to take the case, and we got involved. And ultimately, we were successful. Where he wasn't 6 months earlier, he wasn't even allowed to see his children because of trumped up allegations. But we stood together. We called we had the witnesses, and then it was one of those dream cross-examinations, of the other party. It was a dream cross-examination where the judge just threw his hands up in the middle and said, "I think we're all done here," which is a clear indication the judge was done. Mm-hmm. And we did our summations and whatnot, and my client walked out with full custody, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the rush of winning. Let's talk about. We're lawyers, practice laws. We do it to help people. And the rush of winning was overtaken by the emotions of not only my client but his whole family, and then the kids. And he had a couple teenage kids, so they were involved, unfortunately, more than they should have been because of the other side. And to this day, we still communicate, we still talk, and those kids are like, all of a sudden I was, Mr. Vazana, now I'm Uncle Jimmy. So it's just, yes, it was a great story. And unfortunately, there was also, I'll be honest, there was also some that you just shake your head at, and that happens too. Yeah. You guys can attest to that. It happens too.
Yeah, that's the other thing about our job. And you think about the lawyers that you respect in the community and what's their background. You talked a little about your background, really interesting, coming up through the city of Rochester, being at a top-level high school. And the thing that nobody talks about is what's your ability to handle adversity as a lawyer. Mm-hmm. You're going to be a litigator. You're going to lose.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You show me a lawyer who hasn't lost, they haven't done much.
It's what happens. Right. There's two sides, and if you're not able to resolve it, the matters or the issues that brought you together, then there's going to be a winner or loser when the court makes its decision.
Yeah,
and I think the big thing in dealing with the disappointment, and that's sort of why I like to explain my decisions to people. I know a lot of some judges do, some judges don't. personal opinion. I like to explain it because I want them to know where I was coming from. Maybe they could fix the potential issue that was the roadblock to me having them be successful for a next run or another try. But they walk out knowing why. And I also, because I love lawyers. I mean, let's not get it wrong. I was one of them. Right. But I don't want to leave it up to that. I remember having the challenge of explaining to a client, this is the decision. Inevitably, they ask, well, why? Why did she rule that way? Well, or why did he rule that way? You're like, I have no idea because I disagree with you. We can appeal it, but I don't want to put a lawyer in that position. So at least the lawyer can walk out and say, you heard him.
And I think you inherently know the power of the judge and the power of the courthouse. And people forget.
You would think.
If we tell our client something, they look at us sideways. If the judge, so I had a case, right? Client relatively difficult. We did a really nice job for him. Greg and myself worked together on the case. We got a nice outcome, and they were tough. They wanted the world, and we gave them almost the world. And there's a judge it was out of county. It was down in Livingston County. I said, Judge, can you explain this to these people? What has happened here? He's like, don't worry, I got this. He was a guy who was in private practice, knew what we were going through. He repeated exactly what I just said. The client was wildly happy because the judge said it. Didn't believe me. When the judge says it, okay, great job.
It happens. It happens.
Well, and being a judge, I'm sure, is not always easy. There's probably times where maybe emotionally what you think is right and then what's the law might fight each other, I'm assuming in some cases. And that's got to be hard to go with the law when.
Well, I could only use. Great point.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Absolutely. Great point. I take my oath to follow the Constitution of the state of New York and the United States of America and follow the laws that our legislator, the people, vote in, assemblymen, assemblywomen, assembly people, senatorial people that make our laws. I follow those laws. I don't legislate from the bench. Okay, my job is just to call balls and strikes. But when you get, it's very difficult at times. I find it very difficult at times, though I do it. In certain criminal matters where the matter needs to be dismissed because the law says it needs to be dismissed, but you've got an inkling that something actually did happen. Okay, I mean,
or the opposite. You could flip it, where someone made a mistake, but they have to pay the price to a certain extent. You
mean sentencing wise?
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. You have to hold people.
I'm just saying,
you have to hold people accountable, and
yes.
people have to be accountable regardless if it's civilly, criminally, or if it's me not doing something I said I was supposed to do. There has to be accountability. I think a big thing in my courtroom is your word. I talk to people. I talk to the defendants in the criminal matters, the kids in the family court matters, or the moms or dads or grandmothers or significant others. This is what I expect. This is what we're doing. This is what I expect. And then I go one step further and I say, well, and here are the ramifications if you don't. If you come back. And I had a young gentleman appear before me the other day, and I said, look, we're going to give probation a try. We're going to do this, I guess, because you're going to be able, because if you place somebody on probation in this particular fact pattern, they're going to get services that they desperately need. But if you don't follow through, there's no second, third bite. This is it. You need to go to school. You need to take your counseling seriously. You need to report to probation. And you're giving me your word you're going to do that. And he goes, yes, sir. And I said, and I'm going to give you my word. I'm going to follow this recommendation because you gave me your word. So we give each other our words. They come in on a violation. Unfortunately, those that do come in on a violation know what the next step is. Right. They're ready. They've already said their goodbyes. They've already said it because, and those people, those kids or adults or whatever, they come back. They know it.
Yeah, I feel
There's
like
very little
accountability
argument.
is huge.
There's no argument. There's no place to be outrageously emotional in a courtroom. I mean, we got to just maintain our composures.
Right.
But the families know it. Everyone knows it. And I explain to them, and I like to tell them, because I know respect is a big thing. I believe in it. I tell them, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to you. I'm just explaining. I want you to know what happens. I don't have to threaten anybody. I don't have to. That's not my job, and nor do I even like doing that. But I'm trying to explain to you what would happen next.
Right. And in certain situations, you're probably trying to help them get on a good path. And I'm sure that you come across people who probably fight you on it because they want to fight.
Yeah.
You know. And
I don't want to speak for you, Judge, but it's also respect for the people who do follow through, who you give them a chance. And
we celebrate that. Absolutely.
And they make
celebrate
a difference
But
in their
if
life.
they go out there and change and do what they promise to do to you, and the guy who doesn't gets the same outcome, that's not fair to the people who work really hard.
Right. Absolutely. And we celebrate successes. Absolutely.
I got a couple more here. Law students. We have some following from some law students, kids that are really eager to become lawyers. You hired a bunch of lawyers when you were in
Managing
private
partner,
practice.
absolutely.
You have young lawyers who appear in front of you, and you can, some of these kids, I call them kids now, I don't know, young lawyers, some of the young lawyers are incredibly good. So I'll say Joe Plukas, he's a little younger than me, but I was a more experienced attorney. He comes out of law school. His first day, he's an incredible attorney. His father's a very good lawyer. He's been raised through the system. But what advice would you give to law students to say, hey, you want to be a good lawyer someday? This is a process. You're not going to be, most people are very talented, and some of them get there and some of them don't. What would you say to a law student who wants to be a good lawyer someday?
One, as you know, law school doesn't teach you how to practice law. Law school teaches you and educates you how to find the answers to things. And that's so important. And that is important in carrying on their job, their diligence for the client. Couple suggestions. One, know your case. I mean, it's a simple one, but you'd be surprised. Now, particularly when it's time for trial, but you have to instill in your client that you know the issues that they're confronted with. You know, it's far too often do we see lawyers in the courtroom, talking to their client. Well, talk to him beforehand or her beforehand. Spend a minute. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, but spend a few minutes. Second, observe trials. Mock trial is very important, very effective, and the students that are participating in that are, blow my socks away. Every time I hear them year after year, it's just wow. But there's no substitute for actual real-life court trial time. So I would observe. When I first started practicing, Ray Pauley came in my office and said, he called me Jamie. He goes, Jamie, there's a big battle down in the courthouse. I'm like, there is? He goes, yes. Get your notepad and go watch him. Now, Ray Pauley was a great trial lawyer, as was Brian. I was very fortunate. Brian Barney was, and is. But Jamie, you got to go watch him. So I said, okay. I went down and watched him. It was Ange Faraci from Faraci Lang. And then fast forward about 15 years, my future partner, Lou DeMonda, from Chamberlain DeMonda, Louis DeMonda. Mr. DeMonda, Lou DeMonda was insurance defense. Mr. Faraci was in personal injury. And just the eloquence of their questions, it was a flow. It was poetry, to be honest with you. How the flow of, they had, first of all, the two of them had, you could tell, met for days before. They had all the exhibits marked. They had everything ready. And it was just overwhelming to watch them.
And there were more cases probably tried back then.
Yeah.
Ange Faraci, he probably tried 100 cases.
Oh, my God, yeah. Yeah.
Or more. And that was nothing.
I think, I agree with you. I think there was this is going back 30 years, but less active involvement of the bench at that point. It was, we had a pretrial conference. Here's your scheduling order, motion date, trial date, see you on that trial date. Right. Now the courts tend to get bogged down with more of the minutia in the middle because of this great thing we all talk about as standard and goals.
Yeah,
You don't even want to touch that one, do you? You don't want to even touch that.
Go ahead.
You want? Because I'll say something about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Standard and goals, everyone, is just a number that is in mind that a case should take a certain amount of time from start to finish. And when you get close to the time that was picked for this particular case to go from start to finish, everyone starts getting reports, starts getting emails, and it's almost like artificially moving it forward in a time, and that's when the judge gets a little more involved in the case than allowing the lawyers to do their job. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm just saying certain cases it works better for than in others. For example, let's talk about family law cases. Family law cases, certainly we should have guidelines. I agree with that. And we should keep it on the forefront. When I started practicing matrimonial cases, they were fill-ins. In other words, Mr. King has got a very successful personal injury practice. His personal injury case settled, you would get the phone call, you're starting tomorrow morning for trial. That's how they did the matrimonials, which is kind of crazy,
Yeah.
I'll say it, because there's nothing more complex than a matrimonial case, because you have from the number of issues involved. You have whether or not there were grounds back then for the divorce, if there was custody, then support, tax consequences, tax impaction, business valuations. So one case could have
Custody of children.
Right.
You could have 50, 60 different issues that were in dispute. You would hope not. But so to put a standard and goals on that type of case is very difficult.
I think the idea is people's cases should move through the system. Mm-hmm. The idea of standards and goals is good. When you're the case that gets moved for a reason, some cases have to be delayed. And our experience is if you're a good lawyer and you explain it, the judges can deal with standards and goals.
Oh, absolutely.
They know how to, but
So like maybe criminal isn't the best, like standards and goals isn't always best for criminal, but maybe matrimonial, maybe it's just depending on the case type.
I don't disagree with you. Your point on. I'd flip it though. I mean, criminal, because by the time it comes to a court proceeding, alleged crime has already been committed. So you have an arraignment. You have to just get the information together, depending on what the information is, depending on what the crime is. I mean,
Right.
either defendant took the bike or didn't take the bike, and was a bike taken, and do we have the bike? And so, as opposed to a matrimonial, because the other part on the matrimonial that you cannot forget is the emotional aspects.
Right.
And you know what? You may be happy about this pending divorce, and the other party may be devastated.
Yes.
So
I feel
I'm not
like
going to push
highly
that person
emotional
that's
situation.
devastated. Sorry.
so you talked about, I started with the law students, and then you have these lawyers that come in front of you, younger lawyers maybe. Mm-hmm. And what advice would you give to the lawyers who appear in front of you who are getting started out? Like, how do you we all care, all the lawyers want to make a good appearance in whether it's this courthouse or any other courthouse, right? Your reputation as a lawyer is very valuable and important, but you've met hundreds or thousands of lawyers. What are the things that you can notice from attorneys who appear in your courtroom?
How well they know their case. Okay? They don't have to know every aspect of every issue, okay? But they know that there's an issue. The best advice I can give to young lawyers that are practicing now, and this is across the board, it doesn't have to be my court, it's all the courts, and to law students, you got to get to know your clients too. And we're lucky here we're lucky because there's a lot of places the client is a dollar sign to the lawyer from the business standpoint, and to some degree it has to be because you're running a business. But if you get to know your clients and you can speak to them, you don't have to socially know them, but know their facts, know their issues, that's tremendous help to them and to the court as well.
How about, and this is maybe a more personal opinion, some attorneys try to be friendly with other attorneys. Some are very aggressive towards the other attorneys. What are you expecting of your attorneys being able to work together or not work together? I don't know if you get the question, but there's the softer side of practicing law, and that affects the judges, and the judges affect us as attorneys.
Well, if you can't be professional and congenial with your lawyer, then don't practice law. You have to. Because, you forget, and you know this from all the years of your experience, if you're not, that shoe's going to be on your foot someday. So you have to be able to communicate professionally. I don't care if you don't like each other. I don't care if you go out to dinner with each other every night of the week and you're best of friends. If you focus on what's important for your client and then focus on what the law is, know those things, and be able to present it efficiently to the court, that's a darn good lawyer, and that's a darn good day for both of those parties. But you have to be congenial. You have to be able to talk. Pick up the phone before you go to court. Call the other lawyer. What's going on? Everything new? What can we do? What can we present? I would always, and this is going back to the days I practiced, I would try to start out with, what can we agree on today? Let's see if there's a commonality, then we can build from that.
I like that.
I mean, this is excellent advice for anybody who's listening. This is really top.
Good advice for life, really.
Thank you.
This is what you get after 30 years, and you don't maybe
Go
get
off
that.
that easy on that 30 years.
Well,
I'm not that old.
I'm trying to make
I'm
you look.
kidding.
I'm
A
sorry.
roundabout.
Very experienced jurist. That's what
And it just happens one day, my friend. You just wake up and it's like, oh my God.
yeah. One day your hair turns white. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know.
I'm going to be in my 20s forever, so I don't know what
Amen to that. Amen to that. But yeah, that's, I think, is the best fight. Even if you don't like the other lawyer, pick up the phone and call him or her and just say, hey.
It's our background when we started out was in criminal. In the criminal, there's winning and losing on both sides, and you see the same lawyers over and over. And I think it's pretty collegial practice. When we went to civil, we started doing civil 10 years ago, and you get lawyers from all over the New York State, especially the defense lawyers. There's some aggressive people. I don't know, what the heck is this about? And we've got better at it, but at first it was very shocking to me that was not the way it was.
We're fortunate, particularly in upstate New York, in our district and in our neighboring districts, that we do have a high level of professionalism and a high level of legitimate care for not only the clients, but for the practice of law and the respect for each other. Yes, that's not everywhere. That's not everywhere.
We get lawyers from New York City go against sometimes, and I'm always like, oh, God. Another guy from New York City wants to come up here and defend cases. This is not going to be fun.
It's usually not that successful either.
No.
I liked the advice about for law students going in and watching trials in live, in real time, just based off of also maybe finding other people's styles and going like off of that. If some are more aggressive or some have a softer tone, is that how they want to work and be? Like my cousin is going to law school in Buffalo right now.
Good,
and
good.
and I think I'm going to suggest that he goes and does what you just suggested, because he has more of an aggressive approach. And I advised him, I'm like, you might want to like know your audience, not just have a one track like mindset of how you're going to handle everything. So I think it would benefit him to go in and just kind of see how other people's personalities work and in different types of courtrooms with different judges, and see just overall how the process works.
There's nothing wrong with being aggressive. There's nothing wrong with being argumentative. That's your job. You represent your client. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said know your audience. That may not go over well with a particular judge, or for that matter, a jury.
Right.
Now, the jury, you're going to not know your audience. You actually pick the jury. But, it's always...
There's a style and a
an
tone
approach
to the room. Yeah.
And you're going to have to develop that over time. I mean, you're going to have to develop that over time, and you do that by observing. I mean, there's like Mr. King here, when he practiced the criminal, he was a great criminal defense lawyer. He was right up there with John Speranza, who was an eloquent, and still is. He's a great criminal defense attorney. And even though at that point I never practiced criminal law, I went to go watch him just amazed at how he talks and he interacts with jurors. And And there's a style to it. There's a panache that develops over time. And no one would ever say Mr. Speranza wasn't aggressive, because he could be.
Oh, very, very aggressive. Thank you. One of the great compliments. I mean, John Speranza, we love John Speranza, and and when you're talking about some of these things, you're talking about lawyers. I mean, obviously, John just pops in your head. I mean,
Absolutely.
One of the most skilled attorney, and I think you could give him, he's a criminal defense lawyer. He could try a civil case tomorrow. He could try a matrimonial. And just thinking about the law students and the other lawyers, I guess what I would say is what you're saying, but my version of that is it's really about the evidence. If a good lawyer is trying cases based on the evidence, and what is your evidence? How are you going to use your evidence? How does the evidence tell the story? And if you control the evidence, you're going to be okay. And so we've transitioned from criminal practice to personal injury practice. We're doing mass tort practice now, capital shooting cases. And I meet these lawyers from all over the country. We go to these conferences, and they say, how do you know this? I don't necessarily know everything about the process, but what I do know is there's elements to an indictment. There's elements to a complaint. And if you have the evidence, it doesn't matter what the other lawyer does or says, as long as you can control the facts, you control your client, you're going to be okay. And that's, I think, allows the best lawyers to transition a little bit. And it's interesting what you said about watching trials. The best lawyers, they're the ones who like to watch the other trials. And you're always like, what's John Speranza in here doing watching my trial? I remember we were doing a trial. Christy and I did a trial. Judge Katie Carley, and we did a trial together, co-counsel. And we're sitting there, we're trying this case, and we look out, and John Speranza's sitting there. James Noble's sitting there, and I'm like, the heck are they watching our trial for? They just want to see a little of this or a little of that or a little of the cross or how you're doing your expert. And they don't, the good guys, they don't forget that stuff.
No, you're right. You're right.
I just think it's really cool that a lot of attorneys have different personalities, and yet they're all incredibly successful. It's really, I don't know, it's fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think that was the best advice I ever got from any boss was you got to be yourself. We can, there are certain things that we can teach you, skills, abilities, facts, whatever, but you can't change who you are, and you can't do it like I do it. If I was going to be a judge, I wouldn't be a judge like you, and we probably wouldn't litigate the case exactly the same way. There would be some commonality of practice, but it's just
as long as we get to a fair and just resolution or decision, that's
Exactly.
all that matters.
Yes.
Now, what year is your cousin? Did you say?
I think this is his first year.
First year.
Yes. Yeah, I think he will be a great attorney. He has it. He's very smart. It's just
Is he from here? From Rochester?
Yeah, he
or
went
this
to
area?
Gates.
Okay.
So yeah.
Ask him next
You'll
time you
see him one day.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Ask him next time you see him if they still give quarters out. I remember
Okay.
remember that first day of law school, and then you got I'll never forget my professor Harry Gerla, tort class. My first class Monday morning 9 a.m. was torts, and he comes in there and he has it was a big auditorium and list of all the people, and it takes 10 minutes to take attendance. But the first day he did, and then he slammed everything shut and said, "Class is over because I have to get more quarters for you all to call your parents and ask you to come pick you up because you're not going to make it out of law school." And we all laughed because we were all expecting that. But I wonder if they still do that.
Yeah. I wonder if some people use the quarter.
I don't even know if they have payphones anymore, so I don't know what you're going to do with the quarter. Pick up your cell phone.
Yeah.
What you want to talk about the district at large? So Supreme Court's a big area.
Yeah, Supreme Court
we
is-
should talk about that a little bit. It's a huge geographic area. I grew up in Wayne County.
Right, I know you do.
So part of the 7th JD, but not part of Monroe County Court, obviously. So you grew up in the city, but you will if you're elected, which we all expect that you will be.
That's kind, thank you.
The geographic area. Talk about the district at large a little bit.
All right, sure. The district is a population of a little over 1.2 million, closer to 1.3 million in total population. It's made up of 8 counties. Cayuga County is probably one of the counties furthest to our east. So it goes Cayuga, Monroe, Livingston, Ontario, Seneca, Steuben, Yates, and Wayne County. I got them right. I got those all 8s, right? You got it all. Okay.
You got 'em.
Just,
Good.
it's a great district. Because I've been, an acting Supreme Court judge, I've been able to cycle through a lot of those districts and those courts. And more importantly, as a private practice attorney, when I practiced for 25 years, as we've talked about, I've tried cases in all from Penn Yan, which is the county seat in Yates County, to Bath, to Steuben County, Geneseo, Livingston, Lyons, Wayne, Auburn, Cayuga. I've tried cases in all these counties, Waterloo, Seneca, and they're great people. Everyone has the common interest. I've gone since January. I've been in the race since January. I've put out about 35,000 miles on my car since January up till last night when I went to a meeting in Livingston County. But the common theme behind everyone wants to see justice in your decisions. Doesn't matter if you live in Rochester, New York, or if you live in Nunde in Livingston County. They want to see fairness, respect, and they want to see accountability for actions. That's a common thread no matter where you live. And so that's interesting, and it's great to meet all these people.
So I'm buddies with Judge Dollinger, Mike Dollinger, and he says, the one thing
Great judge.
Great guy too. The one thing that all judges have in common, they got the most votes. So tell us a little about your campaign. I mean, this is a huge commitment for you. I'm sure you considered running even well before you announced. It's a year or a year and a half of your life.
It's a year.
But people don't. I've been involved in going to political fundraisers. I know a little bit, but most people don't understand what it takes to run for New York State Supreme Court. Just explain to them what's your last year been like trying to get elected.
Well, I mean, it's been fun. It's been exhausting. It's never ending because you want to meet and hit as many people as you can to give them information. You see, we can't, as a judicial candidate, you can't talk about issues. We can only talk about expertise and experience, educational background, and who you are. And so everywhere you go, you got to sort of open yourself up to the people so they can learn something about you and then make a proper decision. This election, it started off in January for me. There was only one seat open at that point. There was one seat. A good friend of mine and colleague, Joanne Winslow, she's in the appellate division. She's retiring. She's not seeking a re-election. So that's when I offered myself as this goal. And I was the only one out there. I was the only one out there for a very long time, but that didn't stop. I went and met people. I went to different committee meetings. And there's a lot going on in the 8 counties. I was at the Ovid Strawberry Festival, the Interlaken Parade, down in Cohocton, Wayland. But the opportunity just to meet people and talk about it, because people they want to be engaging. They want to understand. They want to learn. So that's been fun. That's just been so fulfilling, if nothing else. It's just been fulfilling to be able to share that with everyone. And then they like to, your background. So it's just, but I also work all day. I mean, a lot of people can take the time off to actually campaign, or for our assembly people and our senatorial people, they're every day. Their 5-day-a-week commitment ends in June, and they have that time. I no way I haven't taken any time off because of the campaign. Because I don't think it's fair to the litigants that appear before me. We do have a very busy court, as you talked about, and cases are scheduled now are 6-7 weeks away. I don't have the heart to stop that to go do something for my betterment.
Right.
So we're on kind of the lunch hour right now. I know we were talking today. I got these cases on this morning. I had a trial yesterday. I got to make sure we're done so we can get back, and I got 4 cases on this afternoon.
Right.
That's
an example. Good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm long-winded.
Yeah.
That's an example of. So I work every day. So we do this all at nighttime.
Yeah, and I know
I haven't been home earlier than 9-10 o'clock since January.
You're at the event, whatever. Apple Blossom event.
That was great.
You're at this event. I know every night there's another. You're driving to Bath. You're driving to Campbell, New York. You're driving to.
Well, and some nights there's 2 or 3.
Richmond.
So we're hitting an appearance in Auburn, then shooting over to Mount Morris for something, and then stopping in Sodus for another one, and then you're getting home. So it's fun. But in the end of June, or they did add another seat. That other seat, now there's 2 seats. There's 4 candidates running, and there's 2 seats. We say running mate because that's how people understand it. But my friend from Yates County, Jason Cook, is running for the other seat.
And there's a couple Democrat challengers as well.
Yes, there are.
So we're Jim Vazana, Supreme Court.
Yeah,
Bree,
if-
what you got a couple
Yeah, we'll
finish
just
up?
round it out. If anyone is looking to get more information about you, where should they go?
They can go to judgevazana.com.
Okay.
Judge Vazana. I think you're on social media.
Yep.
Twitter.
On Facebook, Twitter.
TikTok?
Not TikTok. Instagram, Facebook, as well as LinkedIn.
We have a TikTok. You should look at Bob's TikTok if you haven't.
We could put him on the TikTok.
Oh boy.
I mean, just again, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk a little bit about my philosophies, my thoughts, my beliefs. I'm very passionate about this election. I'm very passionate about being a judge. I want to make a difference in people's lives, and that's the only thing that's ever really motivated me.
So it's Jim Vazana. He's running for New York State Supreme Court here in our district. Born and raised in Rochester, very experienced in the entire district as an attorney and a judge. I mean, any final thoughts you want to leave our folks with?
Just get out and vote. Your voice needs to be heard. I would love for you, I would appreciate and be very thankful for your vote, but you got to get out and vote. Now more than ever, we need to have our voices heard, regardless of who you vote for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful.